today we have Georg Chmiel. Georg has worked in a number of different industries, technology, property, even the likes of McKinsey. And today we're going to be interviewing him and getting all of his perspectives on AI, and we'll be accompanied by my colleague Tim. So, George, where can we start? Maybe can you just give the audience a bit of context, I guess, about your background and kind of how you got into all the stuff you do today?
Thanks, Jake, and nice to meet you, and also nice to meet you, Tim. So my background is I've got more than 3 decades of experience in technology-related businesses, and for the last 2 decades, very specifically in technology platforms, more and more powered by AI. So I was for 6 years with REA Group, or realestate.com.au, as the group CFO, as well as acting CEO for some time. And I've worked across a number of publicly listed and privately held companies, all doing the same thing, technology platform across a number of different industry, automotive, real estate, regulatory tech, and so on and so forth. And I really enjoy working in this space, and I can see quite some significant change coming up with AI coming into play. So I work across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, maybe a bit more in terms of my geographical focus. And I think that's also an area where there's a lot of change at the moment happening.
Yeah. Well, yeah, obviously a wealth and a breadth of experience there. And I guess, from the perspective of an outsider, it can seem really daunting looking at all that experience and kind of going how you got there, right? But I imagine your career, right, was step by step. And I think the first step, from what I could gather, was you doing computer science in Germany.
Yeah, that's right. So I did about almost 40 years ago, studied computer science. And the reason why I wanted to study it back then was pretty much, I like computer games. So I expected it to be very much about computer games. And of course, it wasn't. It was very much about math, very much about computational analysis, algorithmic geometry, all this stuff. Expert systems, which at that time was the name for artificial intelligence, neural networks, all this stuff. So what I learned there were the basics, which set me up. But can I say, as a career advice, hindsight is always a beautiful thing. It's all about hard work, and there have been a lot of times, a lot of mistakes made, a lot of going back and restarting and other things. So the most important career advice is actually focus on what you really enjoy and do that. And for me, working in smaller companies which are growing fast is really, really exciting. I'm not a corporate person. And if I can then use in these companies my technology skills, and technology skills are actually something which are pretty stable and not so much dependent only on young age. So at any point in time, you can use your technology skills because a lot of experience actually comes handy. Many things have been there before, and there have been many ups and downs. But again, what we are seeing right now is an interesting one.
Yeah. And I suppose, so your transition, right, you started off in Deutsche, in Germany.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, implementing computer systems and doing process redesign, because in the 70s and 80s, a lot of technology was implemented into companies, but then no productivity gains were happening. So everybody was completely hyped up about software and hardware being implemented and all these big servers and so on. But what people then realized is you had to actually improve the business processes first, improve them so they would make use of the technology rather than just digitize what was there, really rethink how should it be different. And the same thing will happen now. I mean, right now, more than 70% of our AI projects don't have a positive ROI. But if you really rethink the business and adopt AI in the way AI needs to be adopted, like changing it, not like AI-ifying the existing situation, but really making it different and solving a real problem, then you will see the same All right. So things, maybe that's the other advice. Sometimes things take a bit longer, but once they happen really fast.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose we had the .com bubble, right?
Yes.
And that I guess that could appear, well, I mean, it was a bubble, but the industry of technology has certainly not been a bubble, I would say.
Correct. And the .com bubble, yes, was a bubble, but it gave us companies like Meta and REA. So the right companies which solved the real problems were in the end surviving. The only issue was there were too many companies who thought by just adding .com to their half-cooked business idea, they would get rich and so on. That's not what's working. And the same thing is happening now with AI. So .ai is kind of the new thing, and ultimately will only come down to really solving proper business processes and proper problems businesses face.
Yeah. And for me, I don't know the trajectory of your life, but it seems like something that kind of transitioned you into the property sector and also just the Australian and Asian kind of market was when you transitioned from Deutsche into McKinsey. Am I correct?
That's right. So. I mean, obviously, I love this part of the world, and when I say this part of the world, I mean Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. And I really like working in also in this market because there's a far more positive approach towards technology and far more embracing. Also can absolutely relate. I've become now Australian to the can-do attitude. I mean, I was given. I was tasked to run one of the big brands in Australia called LG Hooker Group, and that doesn't happen as easily when you come to more the traditional countries like you're in Europe and so on as easily. But this is probably the right culture where technology gets also embraced much more, and that's why we have also so many amazing companies in Australia.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was in Berlin recently, and we were meeting, me and my friends, with some family friends of his, and he was talking to me about what the guy was, the family friend, his job was to sort out, I think, the carbon credits, like the carbon regulation around double glazed windows. And it was admirable to the extent that it seemed like a good regulatory policy, but it also seemed to create a lot of burden, to the point where it was really hard to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is interesting about the whole area of carbon credits? I'm actually involved in a project here which is all about charring plantation leftovers and binding CO2. Because with all the AI, I mean, we're increasing the energy consumption and the CO2 production significantly. I read somewhere 25 small queries to ChatGPT are equivalent to the CO2 production of driving 1 kilometer in a car. So, 800 million ChatGPT users every week produce a lot of CO2. Unfortunately, not always in a very meaningful way, but obviously many good business processes and projects are also being run by ChatGPT. But that's an area we need to sort out. And again, AI is probably the one thing which can actually help us solve this energy and also climate challenge we are facing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can look at it one way and that it does massively increase consumption and CO2, etc. But I mean, if you look at it the other way, and that it can also massively reduce it, so I guess it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's quite a common thing about life, that everything has its positives and has its negatives, and you just need to balance the two.
Yeah.
Do you think we're reaching that balance, or far from?
I think, honestly, I think we're going in the right direction, because one of the main aims where we're using AI is for research, and by improving also our way how we use AI for research, we are more likely to solve, material diseases for humans. We are also able to understand complex systems like climate much better. I mean, look, for the last, for how long, hundreds of years, the weather forecast has always been wrong. And we've always said, it's because it's a chaotic system and whatever. But I mean, the truth is because we're not able to process all the data in a meaningful way. So I do believe actually in the future we might be able to predict it a bit better. But this is probably one of the hardest of all concepts you can think of, to predict that.
Yeah. And now with your main role currently, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's with Juwai-IQI. And from my understanding, it seems to be like a property kind of brokerage that's online, and it services
Yes.
a vast part of the Asian market.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole idea behind it was, like you have got these portals, but portals are effectively only generating leads. And I mean, only in quotation marks, it's important to generate lead, but somebody has to do something with it. And what we thought is taking it one step further. I mean, I've done the portals also in these markets, now taking it one step forward and creating like an app which allows people to work on this app as real estate professionals and sell and rent out properties, creating more transparency via the platform. So a bit like how Uber in Australia has disrupted the taxi industry, doing the same thing. I mean, these are all our own agents. So if you think of our business in Australian terms, it's kind of a combination of an REA and a Ray White or LG Hooker added together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how things can develop, right? Because if we just, I guess, look back to the experience of you had, it started off with the comp sci, and it started off with the property, and now you're kind of, I guess, combining it.
Combining the two. Yes. I'm a big believer in I mean, you need to understand also the industry you're in, because there's too many players who have tried to be great prop tech players, but they haven't really understood the essence of real estate, which is actually helping people to find a home, whether it's for rent or for buying and so on. And if you don't understand the essence, and if all you're trying to do is democratize something you don't fully understand, then no wonder so many go belly up of those players.
Yeah, 100%. And so something that I found interesting, I guess, with that company is the merger that you guys conducted. What was the process like there? Was that stressful? Was it really contested, or was it straightforward?
The hardest thing wasn't so much the internal pressure, but the hardest thing was actually for 2 years convincing investors and other people that we are doing the right thing. Nowadays it's fine, but like you have that always in when you're more on the entrepreneurial or the creational side, you were getting so many no's at the start, unless you're kind of doing something which is already well established and so on. But if you're a bit more on the forefront, just be prepared to get no's, and lots of no's from people who simply don't understand what you're doing. And that, like, obviously everybody believes in their company. It's like, think it's the greatest, it's the best, but sometimes it simply takes time. That's not just, by the way, the case for Juwai-IQI. It's also very similar for other businesses.
Yeah. And yeah, one thing that I find particularly interesting is that, the idea of AI, I think a lot of it gets used for, I guess, repetitive tasks and things that have been done before, right? But when you want to do something new, like the company and like that merger, it's an unknown field and there's no real data to train AI on. So you have to use your human judgment that is acquired through the experiences you have.
I personally think actually it might be safer, unless you're very delusional, to take that approach than just to replicate what other people are doing. I mean, there have been a few players out there who went around the world, they looked, okay, what companies are there in the online space, and they just copied, pasted it into other markets, and then it absolutely failed. Take Uber, for example. It completely failed in Southeast Asia. It completely failed in China because the way of doing business is slightly different. It was then consolidated in a company called Grab, and that's kind of a massive logistics platform. It's not too dissimilar from Uber, but it approaches it in a slightly more local way. And localization is really, really essential when you do go into other markets.
What was some of the pushback you got post-merger?
Pushback was simply people saying that this is just a brokerage, or this won't work. I mean, what it was a bit unfortunate, obviously, on a global scale, but what kind of helped us was COVID, because during COVID, the whole markets shut down, and then none of the traditional brokerages could operate because they weren't operating virtually. During COVID, had like the biggest growth ever. We had like 100% growth, and the business went through the roof. So you always find that. From people. I mean, you have it also in other companies. I'm chairing a company called Spacetalk, and Spacetalk is a watch for kids. And it's or historically was a watch for kids where parents could always see where their young children were. And we looked at it. We said, look, it has its limitations because eventually kids want different kind of devices, and also selling like hardware is really hard. So we converted it more to a software business where you're on the one side an MVNO where you have your own, where you actually sign up to the telco via this business, and the hardware is kind of more the enabler. But the second thing is we said, okay, how long will kids use it? And is there another use group which actually would use it much longer? And it's the elderly. So we've realized that in the senior segment, you can have decades of relationship with an individual person, where all the family members actually are very concerned about the location of that relative, and can trace and also stay in touch and get feedback in terms of if they're okay and so on via this solution. So that's how we have pivoted this business now, and we're now rolling this out. We're doing a big launch at the moment. We've changed the whole concept from this is a kids watch to we're creating freedom for families, freedom for elderly people, freedom for kids, where they can just do what they like doing, but are kind of safeguarded by a infrastructure in the background, and it's showing very promising results already.
Interesting. And then I suppose with the Australian market, what do you think and what do you see are the biggest opportunities with AI? Is it professional services? Is it renewable energy, or is it something even completely different?
Okay. I mean, there's many. Australia has so many. I mean, if you start in the primary market, in the whole mining area, AI has lots of use cases, in terms of the exploration, identification of logistics, like after digging it up, replacement of parts, knowledge about where certain machinery is, and so on and so forth. There's a lot where I can actually optimize things in a very efficient way. Then if you think Australia has also quite an interesting manufacturer, same by the way, not just for mining, but also for agriculture. It's the same thing, like where you use more sensible use of fertilizer, where with drones in combination with AI, there's a lot you can do. You can even do the harvesting in a more intelligent way, in a more energy efficient and nature safer way for the nature, and that goes through all the other industry, including banking. Australia has an interesting banking industry as well, tourism, education. I mean, Australia's one of the biggest exports is education after some of the more mining related stuff. But there's no end. I mean, there is so much. I mean, there have been also so many other companies from Australia. Think of Canva and so many others where AI is playing an important role. AI and technology also makes people less dependent on one location, so they can work from anywhere. Many people work from home, but now more and more you have digital nomads who work from anywhere in the world. So there's a lot of opportunity really out there. Another important thing for Australia is the whole area of energy and the energy distribution, energy, like there's a lot of modeling necessary in that field. How you kind of plan for outages, how you maximize the use of the energy and the creation of the energy across long distances and so on. AI has many use cases. The only thing with AI, and that's one of the areas, it requires people who actually understand a bit about how it works. And it's not like, I mean, many people always say, okay, AI will replace people. I can absolutely assure you this won't be the case, because if you leave AI completely unsupervised, it will optimize its way. Because the biggest issue is you need to be absolutely clear when you use AI what actually your outcome is. And you need to set AI up to work towards a certain goal. And it needs to understand that the goal is the same one as your goal. And there are certain rules in place on how to get to this goal. Because if it goes around those rules and goes off the guardrails, it might come up with an outcome you don't really want or be out of control. So from my perspective, I've seen this in early stage in my career. So let's say 8-9 years ago, we implemented an early form of generative AI in the Malaysian market in the PropTech space. So we implemented a kind of a chatbot, which was using the data from the portal in Malaysia to interact with users. And we gathered all the journalists together and made a big event about it. And, people were typing, show me all 3-bedroom apartments in this suburb, like in plain text and so on. And it was working really nicely. But then one journalist asked, is this apartment furnished? And then the bot said, why don't you find out yourself? And then everybody laughed, and the journalist was very angry with me because they thought I had intentionally done this, or I had somebody in the back room doing it. But it was a classic case of, it wasn't hallucination, it was much reward hacking, early forms of reward hacking from the bot. And then later, 2 years later, at an automotive portal, we also offered the car dealer, like some form of interaction with their clients, where the clients could book test drives and inquire about certain features of the car. That's where we first saw real serious issues of hallucination, where the model tried to prove that certain features of the car existed, even if they didn't exist, because it was the simpler outcome for the model. Obviously, that was 4 years before OpenAI really took off, but nowadays, you can see far, far more. I mean, you had most recently many cases where AI went completely off track, no longer hallucination, but really was doing scheming and trying to be deceptive. So implementing AI will need people in the setup, in running it, and also in the analysis of the information.
Yeah. The way I see it, the most feasible concern isn't full-scale replacement. It's just that the workplace, and especially the graduate workplace, gets much more competitive because they can automate some of the grunt work that a young graduate might do. So, for example, a top law firm, instead of taking in, 20 grads, they might take in 15. And whilst, that's not, it's not a full-scale doomsday thing, right? That does have a real human consequence.
Absolutely. And in another company I'm involved in Kinatico, which is a compliance software solution, we are obviously developing our software further and further, but we have realized we are much better off hiring actually junior programmers. So not doing just wide programming, and then trying to, with some senior programmers, trying to refine the outcome. No, we are much better in actually having junior programmers from the start involved in the creation process. So I think with all things, there's always one extreme and then it swings back. But one thing is for sure, everybody needs to have AI skills, irrespective of the profession. And I'm not just saying this because I love AI, but we have to. Otherwise, you need to be able to know what you're dealing with.
Do you have any concerns, because especially in the prop tech space, there sometimes is the issue of verification with ML CTF rules. How do you sort of approach that?
I would say, I do have obviously concerns around it, but I do believe AI will actually make it easier. I mean, we had fraud cases before. We had cases where photos were manipulated, so to speak, or fake listings were created and payments were then requested and so on. I do believe AI can actually help much better in fighting cybercrime. But again, AI makes cybercrime harder and more sophisticated, but then at the same time helps fighting these issues. So it needs to be weighed up again. AI skills are required, and AI skills can also be presented to all the professionals in a more intelligent way.
So in terms of positioning yourself in this world, what do you think is the best way that young students or young graduates, especially from a more non-technical background, can kind of, ensure they don't get automated and ensure they can, have the most fruitful life in this new era?
I mean, there's a lot of training available in all sorts of form. I mean, you can either, what I would anyhow do, I mean, pretty sure everybody does that, use a number of those language models and interact with them, and different tools, like learning on how the graphic creation is and so on. But there is actually a lot of training out there for people to improve their skills. And to me, that is very, very important. Number one, AI skills. Number two, as for the profession and so on, I would strongly recommend, if people are very passionate about a certain topic, a certain industry, a certain function, to go for it. Because ultimately, doing what you really like doing is the best guarantee for success. I mean, I made the mistake at the start, and I say that openly, for the first 10 years of my career, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was a bit here, was a bit there, and so on and so forth. And only after, getting the basics right, so I worked for KPMG for 4 years and got my finance skills brushed up, and then started at REA. Only then was I really in a job which I enjoyed, and so on. So why was I not from the start? I didn't know, is it better to work for a company with good branding? That's what I thought. Oh, okay, I need this on my CV because it comes up. I mean, you even mentioned it, but if you ask me, yes, I learned a lot from it, but it wasn't enjoyable for me. It's not a job I would take up again. I would rather go probably more directly into an entrepreneurial career or an online career afterwards. That's what I really enjoy. I enjoy numbers. I enjoy that, so just doing something for the because it gets you potentially somewhere is not always the best strategy. That doesn't mean that studying hard isn't required and so on. And I know it's painful, and I know how much stress people are under and so on. But focus on something you really enjoy, because if you feel passionate about it, you will go the extra mile. That's my only key learning.
Back to that point on branding, how important would you say that is in today's employment market?
I think branding is important, but the way of doing branding in the past, which was like, I work for this company, therefore I tick this box, tick this box, tick this box, will also get more and more replaced by self-branding. So we noticed, where was I there, 15 years ago and so on, in LG Hooker, that the brand of the individual salesperson became bigger and bigger and overshadowed the brand of the group. So, like you wanted to deal with a certain agent, and you didn't really care if this agent was with LG Hooker or with Ray White. And the equivalent to this is what you are doing with your podcast and so on. You're actually building an amazing brand because you're kind of creating something for yourself. I mean, I'm also this company here is an influencer and creator platform in Southeast Asia. And we are targeting the lower end in terms of followership of the influencers. Can be 5,000 or 10,000 Instagram followers, and to create something and so on. If you focus on certain things, and if you stand for something, and if you are an expert in something, that type of branding is very, very valuable. It does not have to always be, I'm not saying it's bad, but it does not always have to be the top company in a certain field. I'm not saying these companies are bad, because I mean, you learn a lot and you get a lot of training in these companies and other nice benefits. But what I'm saying is, long term, do what you really like doing and build your own brand.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely prudent advice, and I think there's definitely so many different opportunities to take in this new space Yeah, and
it's a bit like
thing,
a reshuffle. It's a bit like a reshuffle you know, like in the past, you had to do this, then you had to do this, and you couldn't downgrade. So once you downgraded, you could never be up. Once you worked for a second tier kind of company, then it was hard to get up again and so on. Nowadays, it's a bit different. If you're building, you have all the tools available to really build a reputation and build your knowledge. Let's say if you're artistic, you have far more opportunities to express yourself. If you love education, you can access far more knowledge bases and so on. So the issue is nobody will lose the job because they didn't get access to education. Nobody will get the job because there weren't enough opportunities. The only issue is that certain industry will suffer short term, and types of roles will change. They will change for sure.
Yeah, I think we're in a bit of more of a realistic time, and that, you know, things still matter, like where the company you work for or what university you went to, because it should to some extent. But then there's other ways to learn the things that I guess those institutions used to signify.
I mean, sometimes it can also work in your favor. Look, I worked for, I was at a public university, because in Germany, many universities are public. And I'll be honest, it was painful to say the least. I mean, 30 years later, now this university everybody wants to go to. I don't know why. When we were there, it wasn't like this. So things also change. You know, like so believe in yourself is what I'm trying to say. I mean, obviously talk to other people, but I mean, if you talk too many other people, you don't know where you want to go. It's easier said than done, and it takes sometimes years to find out what you really want.
Yeah. More to a global perspective, it seems like from the time when you were coming up, it was kind of, you know, post Cold War, like, you know, post kind of, you know, with the end of history stuff, and
yes,
you know, the peak of globalization. Now, you know, the Ukraine war with Taiwan, China potentially, where we're kind of in a return to history, right? How do you see that impacting AI? Because we're not going to have, you know, Apple getting aided by the Chinese Foxconn. Now we have OpenAI versus DeepSeek, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, one, obviously with the great proliferation of social media and so on, I mean, it's hard at this stage not to feel that we're living in tough times, when in fact the times are not necessarily as tough as they were. So, I mean, if you research a bit, like, I mean, what do people die? Like in the 70s, for example, in the 70s was pretty tough compared to now. But obviously, we say now we're in tough times. But if you go back 50 times, you're in actually a tougher time. And if you go back another 50 years, you're in the middle of the world economic crisis, post First World War, all this stuff. So you always feel that in the presence it's tough. But having said that, I mean, there is a bit of rivalry between AI, but like there was different rivalry before. There was always IBM versus Apple or others, and it was healthy rivalry. I do believe AI can certainly help us with any technology. It's always a question about how is it being applied. I mean, you can use anything in a good or in a not so good way. But I do believe that what AI does is it allows, and other technologies associated with it, it makes us a bit more aware of what is happening, how things are working, makes us also at the same time more prone to be maybe misled, because, you know, if we all listen to the same kind of fake news on Instagram or others, we all start to believe it. And it's being used quite actively in all sorts of conflicts at the moment. But I wouldn't say, yeah, I mean, obviously we kind of everybody thought, and we even studied it in the late 90s, that's the end of the civilization, or these different cultural clashes. But I mean, what that was is probably a complete neglect of all the knowledge which was there about history for many hundreds of years. And if you just look back, I mean, you always had these phases where you thought you might have been over a certain thing. But at the same time, I mean, there's also very positive things. I mean, if you think of the region I live in Southeast Asia and also Australia, I mean, there was a massive growth for the last 2 decades, at least, or 3 decades almost. And there is continued growth. I mean, yes, there have been hiccups now and then, like 1 year or 2 years downturns. But overall, the region we are living in on this part of the world are actually really, really have a fantastic future ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think history is always a bit harder when you're the one living in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
People often talk about the decentralization of finance and how we've been moving towards that moment where centralized banks will become redundant. There'll be sort of centralized currencies and whatnot. So what's your view on decentralization of finance?
I mean, I assume you're referring to all these, Web3 kind of impacts about. I mean, I've been through a few times where we moved one way or another time, but it was always good to have one point of truth. Now, you can obviously model the same thing completely decentralized, but what we already know is it takes a lot of energy and effort to keep that system going. Number 2 is if there are disputes, and yes, we know this. There's no financial variance between the different ledgers which are happening decentralized. But if there's a dispute across between 2 countries and so on, I don't know who should actually resolve the matter. And so I think it will open up a number of different new questions. I think maybe the best way is to say, like everything, in moderation, there will be certain areas where the decentralization will make a lot of sense and will make life very, very easy. And there will be areas where a centralized approach is still kind of needed. But existing players, whether it's stock exchanges or big banks and so on, certainly need to really, really accelerate their transformation fast if they don't want to be left behind. Because, I mean, payments can be done in a far more decentralized way or with other players. And I mean, if you think of cryptocurrencies and so on, there's a lot of shakeup coming up for the markets. And I don't know how this all will end, but it will open up a lot of great opportunities because some of the things which we're exposed today are also extremely clunky and painful.
And another thing that I find interesting is the concern around like the circularity with AI financing and if that can kind of create its own bubble. And I suppose a lot of, kind of the conclusion to that would be if this stuff can really be monetized. So what is your perspective on kind of the notion of AI kind of finance bubble, the new 2008? Do you think that's going to be the case, or I imagine not?
I mean, there have been always bubbles, but it didn't impact every company. Like I mean, there have been bubbles in the 50s and 60s. Any company with Onyx at the end, Tektronix or whatever at the end had massive valuation, and that all crashed. But these companies are like these technology companies are still around. Like, I mean, and the .com bubble, I mean, there's still a number of very, very good companies around, and they are now worth far more than anybody had ever dreamt. And the same thing will happen with AI. I mean, we're at the very early stage. There will be ups and downs, but anyone who will solve a real problem will win. And the only thing is what we need to do is we need to just make sure we are staying on kind of on top of AI. We don't let it go off the guardrails. And I can't say that enough because these risks will be very, very hard to get back under control. If you reach the point where AI effectively becomes independent of us as humans and creates AI. AI is the biggest user of AI to do research and so on and so forth. Then more and more the question will be asked, what is our role? And I know this sounds a bit philosophical, it sounds a bit doomsday, but there have been already enough cases. I mean, if you haven't seen it, you should Google the Anthropic, the Claude AI people. They did some tests and so on. And there's this famous blackmailing case where they kind of put the system under so much pressure that it threatened to disclose an extramarital affair of one of the person wanting to switch off the system. Obviously, that was a bit staged, but it went through all the emails and it found a reason to argue. And if you look at the movie, I mean, 25 years ago, 2001, Space Odyssey, it's exactly the same thing, where kind of AI responds not favorably to someone, a human, trying to alter its destiny. So this is not, we need to be aware of that. That will happen.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see, what's real and then what's our kind of Y2K moment with the new AI stuff.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the Y2K is a great example.
And how far do you think we're from
I worked at KPMG during that time, and we had a lot of projects from very stressed customers, and in the end, it kind of wasn't an issue.
How far do you think we're from that point, that Y2K moment, if at all?
Y2K moment. I mean, we are definitely very close to the point where we're seeing more and more cases where AI scheming and AI deception is taking place, and we're also quite aware of it. But I mean, the biggest issue which we also need to solve, or one of the big issues, is liability. So who is liable if AI stuffs something up, so to speak? So I think we are straight in the middle, and it will impact a lot of areas, whether it's legal questions, whether it's taxation questions. When AI creates something, should tax be paid on it? I mean, the EU, who is known for regulating any progress, so rather than focusing on innovation, they always try to do everything with policies. They had for a long time talked about tax and payroll tax for these agentic AIs and so on. Yeah.
Do you think the European Union, their regulatory approach will sort of ease in the coming decades, years?
I think the relevance will ease, and as a result of that, I don't know if the regulatory pressure will ease off, because people always then revert to what they think has worked in the past. They do more of that rather than look into the mirror. So I cannot see too much understanding on the political side about what is really required but I can see a lot of amazing companies in that part of the world who are already innovating quite well. So my money is always on the industry to find the right direction and the politics to follow.
To some extent, it's also the EU's comparative advantage compared to an Asia or a US that have different things they're good at.
Also true. You never know. That's the beauty. Your weakness might be your strength in this fast-changing world tomorrow.
So to close it off, I suppose in a few sentences, if you could advise like kind of an anxious student about what's the best way to position themselves in this new technological era, what would you say?
So number one is not to panic. Even if you read a lot about AI, do not panic, because everybody feels the same way, and things don't happen as fast as we think. So I mean, everything you read today, it won't happen overnight. Number two is believe in yourself and focus on brushing up your knowledge about AI with external resources, talking to your friends, and so on. And number three is think about your career. What is it? And this is the hardest one. What is it really? What enjoys you every day, makes you happy every day? What you enjoy every day, and focus on that, and become the champion for AI also in this field. And I do believe your future is safe.
George, thank you for your time. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you, Jag, and thank you also, Tim.